I never thought my life would take this turn. For the last few years, I had been married to Sarah, a woman who once filled my days with laughter and love. But recently, layers of discontent started creeping in. We had business as usual, navigating through life, but things felt off. It was subtle at first. She would come home late from work, her phone glued to her hand, and a sense of distance hung between us like a thick fog. We decided to try couples therapy, hoping to mend the cracks that had begun to form in our marriage. I believed in our love and thought we'd find our way back to each other. I sat there listening to her share her thoughts, and I wanted to be supportive. But every session felt like I was groping in darkness. Sarah would often shift the blame onto me, painting a picture of a husband who didn't understand or care. I kept wondering if there was something I was missing. It was during one of these sessions that I noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed more anxious and distracted, frequently glancing at her phone, as if the therapist's words were mere background noise. I brushed it off at the time, thinking it was just stress from working full-time while juggling therapy. But in the back of my mind, something gnawed at me. The real wake-up call came when I stumbled upon a series of text messages that shattered my world. I had gone into her room to find something, and there it was, her phone lying on the bedside table. The screen lit up with a conversation that made my heart race, and not in a good way. I caught snippets of flirtatious banter, promises of secrecy, and a series of heart emojis that made my stomach churn. It was a classic cliché: my wife was having an affair. I was overwhelmed, every emotion crashing over me like a wave. Anger, betrayal, confusion. I felt like I was drowning. I put the phone back down and walked out of the room, my heart pounding. I needed to confront her, but I didn't want to do it in a fit of rage. I wanted to gather my thoughts and plan my words carefully. When I finally confronted Sarah, it wasn't in a confrontational manner. I approached her after dinner when the moment felt right, although deep inside I was a volcano ready to erupt. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with tension. She looked at me, her lips curling into a hesitant smile, clearly not expecting what was about to unfold. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "I found some messages on your phone. Can you explain?" Her face dropped, and for a brief moment I thought I saw fear. But then she quickly masked it with a false bravado. "Oh, come on, it's just harmless flirting. You know how people are. It doesn't mean anything." The words hit me like a slap. Harmless flirting. My mind raced back to the texts I read, the intimate exchange, the emotional connection she clearly had with someone else. I pushed back. "Harmless. Sarah, this isn't just flirting. This is a full-on affair. How could you do this to us, to our marriage?" She began to twist the narrative, blaming me for not being present enough, for having unrealistic expectations. And somehow, in her mind, it was all my fault. This affair was just a symptom of our problems. It was infuriating and sad. The last shred of respect I had for her began to evaporate. As I stood there, watching her defend her actions, I felt a storm of emotions swirling inside me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to make her understand the depth of my pain, but instead, I stood silent, processing the magnitude of her betrayal. I had let her confess, thinking it might lead to some semblance of honesty, but all I realized was that she was still willing to lie her way through this mess. The moment felt surreal. I was in a therapy session with my wife, and instead of working through our issues, she was busy betraying me. I couldn't believe I had given her my trust, only to have it shattered in front of me. I felt foolish, used, and heartbroken. After a long pause, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card. "Here's my lawyer's card," I said, my voice steady. "I think it's time we talk about the future." The look on her face was priceless. Shock, disbelief, and a hint of regret flashed across her features. I turned and walked away, feeling a mix of empowerment and heartbreak. So began the journey of unraveling my marriage, one that I never planned on taking. The betrayal cut deep, but I knew I had to navigate this path carefully. I had chosen to confront the truth, and now it was time to face the consequences of her actions. After I handed Sarah my lawyer's card, the tension in the room thickened like molasses. I could feel her eyes boring into me, full of disbelief and anger. It was a moment I had never imagined, and yet here I was, standing my ground. She sputtered a few words, but they came out as incoherent fragments, like a car sputtering to a halt. "You can't be serious," she finally exclaimed, her voice rising. "I am serious, Sarah. You've crossed a line, and I won't pretend like everything is fine. You broke my trust, and now it's time to figure out what happens next," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. I didn't want to shout, I wanted clarity, no more lies. Her reaction was a twisted mix of anger and desperation. "You're overreacting." I made a mistake. "Don't you want to work on our issues? We can fix this, let's not be hasty," she pleaded. "Fix this? You think I can just overlook what you've done? You can't just blame me for your choices, Sarah." I felt the sting of betrayal lashing at my heart. The anger was palpable, but deep down an ache of sorrow began to grow. She continued to deflect, trying to turn the conversation back to me. "You've been so distant for years." I felt lonely. "I thought we were just going through the motions." Each word was like a dagger, and with every excuse she made, my resolve hardened. I realized she didn't quite grasp the gravity of her actions. I had thought I knew her, but I suddenly felt like I was standing across from a stranger. I thought we were partners navigating life together, but her affair revealed that she had been living in a different world, a world where she felt entitled to betray our shared vows. The conversation devolved further into accusations and denial. I listened as she tried to manipulate the narrative, painting herself as the victim of circumstance rather than the architect of her own downfall. I had to find comfort somewhere. "You were oblivious to my needs," she shouted. My heart raced, but I felt an odd calmness wash over me. I had confronted her, and I wouldn't let her drag me back into the cycle of gaslighting. I stood up, looking down at her. "I won't be part of this blame game, Sarah. You made your choices, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." The emotional whirlwind continued to churn within me as I stepped away from the conversation. I felt a mix of sadness and empowerment. It was surreal. This woman who used to be my partner, the love of my life, was now a source of pain. I didn't recognize her anymore, and it terrified me. That night, I found myself packing the floor of my living room. I tried to distract myself with TV shows or mindless scrolling on my phone, but nothing could drown out the turmoil inside. I felt raw and exposed, like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. My mind was racing with thoughts of our years together, our wedding day, our vacations, our shared dreams, and now they all felt tainted. As the hours passed, I was hit with waves of conflicting emotions. Anger surged through me, building like a tidal wave threatening to drown me. I wanted to lash out, to tell everyone what she had done, but I also felt an overwhelming sadness. This was the woman I had promised to love and cherish. What had gone wrong? I pulled out the card again, tracing my fingers over it. The idea of consulting a lawyer felt like the ultimate betrayal of what we had built together. I had never imagined I would be sitting here, contemplating divorce. The thought brought tears to my eyes, and I felt fury rise within me once more. How could she put us in this position? The next few days were a blur. I tried to act normal, going to work and carrying on with daily life, but inside I was battling a storm. I kept replaying our last conversation in my mind, analyzing every word, every inflection in her voice. I wanted to understand how we got here. Friends began to notice my mood and would casually ask what was going on. I had told a couple of close friends about my situation, but I was still hesitant to share the full extent of my pain. How could I explain that my wife, the woman I loved, had chosen to step out on our marriage while we were trying to fix things? One night, after a few drinks with a close friend, I found myself sharing more than I intended. "She cheated on me, man. I thought we were working on our issues, and then I find out she's been with someone else. It's like a bad movie," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. My friend listened and offered support, but it didn't make the pain go away. I felt a mix of shame and relief in sharing my story. It was liberating to finally say the words out loud, but at the same time, it made the reality of my situation even more acute. I spent nights reflecting on our relationship. I had invested so much time and energy into making it work, only to have her betray it so casually. Each day that passed felt like I was walking through thick fog. Everything was uncertain, and I felt lost. The thought of reaching out to a lawyer made me feel like I was betraying the good times we had, but every time I dismissed it, I was reminded of her infidelity. In the quiet moments, I began to understand that I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to make a decision. What would I choose? Would I fight for the marriage or walk away? The betrayal was fresh, but I knew that clarity would come. I just had to let myself feel everything first before making the leap into my future. The path ahead was murky, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't be a doormat, and I wouldn't let her betrayal dictate my life any longer. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself in a state of constant emotional turmoil. Each morning I woke up hoping for clarity, but every night I fell asleep overwhelmed by confusion. The weight of Sarah's betrayal hung over me like a heavy cloud, blocking out any rays of hope. It was exhausting, and I knew I had to confront it head-on. I decided to take a week off work, needing space to sort through my feelings and think about my next steps without the daily grind consuming me. During this time, I began reflecting deeply on our relationship. I thought about the moments we had cherished, the laughter we shared, and the years we had spent building a life together. But just as quickly, I was reminded of the moments that led to this point, the arguments, the distance, and ultimately, the affair. It was during this week of contemplation when I realized I needed to confront Sarah again, not just about the affair, but about everything that had led us here. I wanted to demand the truth, not just the half-hearted apologies and empty promises she had thrown my way during our last conversation. I needed to dig deeper and understand her motivations, why she felt the need to cheat, and why she seemed so willing to throw away our marriage. After a few days of agonizing over how to approach this, I finally sat down and texted her, asking if we could meet. My heart raced as I hit send. I felt both anxious and determined. This was a pivotal moment, and I needed to approach it with a firm resolve. When she showed up at the coffee shop, I could see the tension in her shoulders. It was as if she hadn't quite prepared herself for a confrontation, but the moment she stepped in, I knew I had to be direct. I motioned her to sit down, and she complied, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. "Thanks for coming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to talk about everything. This isn't just about the affair anymore. I need to understand why you did it." Her initial reaction was defensiveness. "You don't need to go digging into my motivations. I already told you I was lonely," she exclaimed, her tone sharp. "No, Sarah, you don't get to dismiss this like it's nothing. I need you to be honest with me. What did you think would happen? How could you go through with this while we were trying to fix our marriage?" I could feel my pulse quickening, but I fought to keep my emotions in check. She sighed, crossing her arms over her chest as if trying to shield herself from my words. "I don't know, okay? It just happened. I didn't plan for it. I felt disconnected from you. We were in therapy, but it felt like we were just going through the motions. I was frustrated. I found someone who actually listened to me, someone who made me feel good about myself." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. "So you decided to betray me? You thought that was the solution?" I felt the anger boiling beneath the surface again. "You could have talked to me. You could have been honest." I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of facing the truth. "I thought I could handle it on my own," she shot back, her voice trembling. "So you thought cheating was a smart way to handle it?" My voice was rising despite my attempts to remain calm. "You chose to betray our marriage, Sarah. You chose to lie to me. Don't act like you were a victim here." She looked down at the table, unable to meet my gaze, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. But then it was gone, replaced by the bitter reminder that this was the woman who had shattered my trust. The conversation spiraled into a series of accusations and justifications. I pushed her, demanding answers, wanting to peel away the layers of excuses and see the real Sarah beneath it all. With each revelation, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. She painted a picture of her loneliness, her struggles, and her insecurities, but it felt like a feeble attempt to justify her actions. "Why didn't you think about me? About what this would do to us?" I asked, my voice softer now. "I would have listened. I would have fought for you if you had just said something." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment I saw a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with. But just as quickly, the wall came back up. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could keep it separate. "I never meant for things to go this far," she replied, her voice cracking. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting. I felt my anger ebbing, replaced by a profound sense of sadness. I had hoped for a deeper understanding, a revelation that would somehow make sense of this mess, but instead, I was left with more questions than answers. As our conversation waned, I realized that I needed to make a decision about our future. I had listened to her excuses, and while I could empathize with her struggles, I couldn't ignore the impact of her betrayal. I had to prioritize my own well-being now. "I need time to think, Sarah. I'm not ready to decide what happens next, but I can't continue like this either," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You need to really consider what you want, too. If you want to salvage this marriage, then it's going to take more than just empty words." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm so sorry, I regret everything," she murmured. We parted ways that day, feeling emptier than before. The conversation didn't bring the closure I had hoped for, but it gave me clarity. I finally understood that I needed to take back control over my life. It became evident that I couldn't keep putting Sarah's feelings ahead of my own. It was time for me to reflect and determine what I truly wanted moving forward. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had confronted her, unearthing truths that were painful to face, but I knew this was only the beginning. I was on the path toward reclaiming my life, and whatever decision I made next, I would ensure it was one rooted in self-respect and honesty. After our intense conversation at the coffee shop, I found myself wrestling with the emotional aftermath. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to navigate through the confusion of my thoughts and feelings. I was caught in this whirlwind of anger, disappointment, and, oddly enough, a flicker of hope that maybe Sarah could really change. Yet, I knew deep down that hope could be a double-edged sword. I began to meet with my own therapist, someone I had been hesitant to see before but felt was now necessary. I needed a safe space to process everything, and talking to someone who was objective helped me see the situation more clearly. During our sessions, I poured out my heart, detailing my feelings of betrayal, confusion, and the deep sense of loss I was experiencing. My therapist encouraged me to focus on my needs and feelings, rather than attempting to fix the marriage outright. "You have to prioritize your mental health," she said one afternoon. "Understand what you need before you can even think about the future of your relationship." That resonated with me. For years, I had focused on what Sarah needed, what our marriage needed, and in doing so, I had neglected my own emotional well-being. I began journaling my thoughts, writing down everything that had hurt me, everything I felt I had lost. It was cathartic, but it also made the reality of my situation hit home even harder. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to reach out to me, sending texts filled with apologies and promises to change. Part of me wanted to believe her, to see the glimmer of hope that maybe we could rebuild what had been lost. But every time I read her messages, that familiar anger would resurface, reminding me of how easily she had abandoned our vows. One evening, she insisted on meeting again, wanting to have a serious discussion about the future. I was hesitant but agreed, knowing that this would be another chance to gauge her sincerity. We met at a quiet park, the kind of place we had once enjoyed together, and it felt surreal being there under such heavy circumstances. As we sat on a bench, she confessed how she had been going to therapy on her own, seeking to understand her actions and feelings better. "I'm trying to figure out why I did what I did," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to be better, not just for us, but for myself too." "Do you really mean that?" I asked, searching her eyes for any sign of genuine remorse. "Because words can be hollow, Sarah. I need to see real change, not just talk. I know that, and I don't want to lose you. I want to work on my issues, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes," she replied earnestly. "I'm so sorry for what I put you through." Her words were a mixture of desperation and sincerity, and for a moment I found myself wondering if she could actually follow through. But then I recalled the pain she had caused, the betrayal that shattered my trust. "It's going to take more than just promises," I cautioned. "You have to be willing to face the consequences, and right now I'm not." Sure, I'm ready to forgive you. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I understand. I don't expect you to just forget everything. I can't change the past, but I want to prove to you that I can be better. As we talked, I began to feel a shift within myself. I wasn't there to just appease her with false hope or to accept her empty apologies. I had to focus on what I wanted. I realized that I didn't just want to salvage our marriage. I wanted to ensure that I was taking care of myself first. Look, I appreciate you wanting to change, and I'm glad you're seeking help, I said, my voice steadier now. But I need to take a step back and think about what's best for me. I can't promise anything right now. I need time. Her expression fell, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. I understand, she whispered. I just hope I can prove to you that I can change before it's too late. We parted ways again, and as I drove home, I felt a sense of clarity that I hadn't experienced before. I was no longer caught in the cycle of trying to fix things for her sake. I was finally putting myself first. It was liberating, yet terrifying. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself, rediscovering hobbies I had long set aside and reconnecting with friends. I took up hiking, a passion I had abandoned during my marriage. The fresh air and solitude helped me clear my mind, allowing me to process everything. I spent time with my buddies who continually supported me, reminding me of my worth. Gradually, I felt the heaviness in my heart lift. I was still hurt, but the anger was transforming into a sense of empowerment. I had every right to be upset, and I began to understand that healing takes time. One night, as I was reflecting on my journey thus far, I noticed a message from Sarah pop up on my phone. It was a simple text asking how I was doing. For a moment I hesitated, contemplating whether to respond. I could feel the pull of my emotions. Was I ready to engage again? I decided to reply, letting her know I was doing okay but still needed my space. It felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming my boundaries. We exchanged a few messages, but I kept them brief. I wanted her to understand that I was moving forward, even if it meant taking a detour from what we had. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on everything that had transpired. I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. I had spent years invested in a relationship that had ultimately hurt me, but now I was on the path to healing. I realized that I had the power to choose my future, and that realization was a powerful tool in my newfound journey. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to embrace whatever came my way. I was reclaiming my life, one step at a time, and that was the most liberating feeling of all. As the weeks passed, I found myself gradually moving through the stages of healing. I had entered a new phase of my life, one where I was no longer living in the shadow of Sarah's betrayal. I was focusing on my own growth, attending therapy regularly, and finding strength in my independence. However, I still felt the weight of our relationship lingering in the background, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Sarah and I exchanged a few texts here and there, but I kept our interactions minimal. I understood she was trying to show accountability, but every time I heard from her, I felt a mix of annoyance and pity. I recognized her efforts, but I was still grappling with my feelings and trying to determine how I wanted to proceed. One evening, as I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Can we meet? I want to talk about us," it read. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Part of me was curious, while another part wanted to run away from the conversation altogether. After a brief internal debate, I decided to meet her. I told myself it was important to hear her out, but I also knew I had to set boundaries. When we met at a local park, I could see the determination in her eyes, but I also sensed the nervous energy emanating from her. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice shaky. "I really appreciate it. I've had some time to think, and I want to be honest with you about everything." I nodded, my heart racing. I needed to hold my ground. "Okay, let's hear it." "I've been reflecting on my actions and what led me to cheat," she began, her eyes searching mine for understanding. It wasn't just about feeling lonely. It was about my own insecurities, my fear of being vulnerable, and my inability to communicate. I thought I could find a quick fix with someone else, but I was wrong. Her words struck me hard. Part of me wanted to empathize, to understand the pain she had gone through, but another part of me screamed in frustration. She had made choices that hurt me deeply. I appreciate you being honest, but this doesn't erase what you did, I countered, keeping my tone steady. You chose to betray our marriage. You could have dealt with your insecurities in a different way. You broke my trust. I know that. Sarah's voice rose, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now, but I want to show you that I can be better. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm working on myself for real this time. Working on yourself is great, but it doesn't mean we can just go back to the way things were, I said firmly. You have to understand that I'm still hurt. You destroyed something we built together, and it's going to take time for me to even consider what a relationship might look like again. She nodded, her expression softening. I know, I'm not expecting everything to go back to normal overnight. I just wanted you to know that I'm truly committed to changing and that I'm willing to put in the effort. The conversation shifted, and we began to discuss what it would take for me to even consider rekindling our relationship. I spoke candidly about my need for trust and transparency, and how important it was for me to see her actively working on her personal growth. I outlined my own boundaries, emphasizing that I needed space to heal. As she listened, I could see the determination and sincerity on her face. I understand your boundaries and I want to respect them, she said softly. I care about you and I don't want to lose you. I'm committed to doing the work not just for you, but for myself too. We parted ways that day with an ambiguous sense of hope. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I felt a glimmer of possibility. I was still guarded, but I was beginning to see that perhaps rebuilding trust could be a gradual process. In the days that followed, I continued focusing on my own healing. I dedicated more time to my hobbies, started volunteering at a local community center, and made an effort to reconnect with friends I hadn't seen in ages. I realized that I was carving out a new identity for myself, independent of Sarah. But just as I felt I was making progress, I was hit with a wave of doubt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, wondering if I was ready to take that leap of faith again. One night I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with my thoughts. Could I forgive her? Could I even trust her again? The next day I made the decision to reach out to my therapist again. I needed a sounding board to discuss my fears and uncertainties. During our session, I expressed my conflicting emotions about potentially reconciling with Sarah. I feel like I'm stuck, I confessed. I want to move forward, but I'm terrified of getting hurt again. My therapist listened patiently, validating my feelings. It's completely normal to be apprehensive, especially after what you've been through. Healing isn't linear, and it's important to honor where you are in this process. If you're considering a future with Sarah, it's crucial to assess whether you can rebuild trust and if she's truly showing up for that. Her words resonated with me. I realized that I didn't need to rush into any decisions. I could take my time, evaluate the situation, and prioritize my emotional health without fear of judgment. That weekend, I decided to meet Sarah again. This time, I felt more grounded. I approached the conversation with a clearer mind, ready to communicate my feelings honestly. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I said as we sat down at our usual cafe. I want to be transparent with you about my feelings. She nodded, encouraging me to continue. I'm still healing from everything that happened, I continued. I want you to know that while I appreciate your commitment to change, I'm not ready to jump back into a relationship. I need time to see if you're truly putting in the work. I understand, she said, a mix of relief and disappointment crossing her face. I'm willing to be patient. I'll keep putting in the effort and I will respect your space. Just please don't shut me out completely. I won't, I reassured her. I just need to be honest about where I am. If you're genuinely committed to working on yourself and being transparent with me, then we can take small steps toward rebuilding. As the conversation progressed, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. I could see Sarah's genuine desire to change, and while I was still guarded, I felt the weight of my heart begin to lighten. We concluded our meeting with a tentative agreement to keep the lines of communication open, but also a mutual understanding that there were no guarantees. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. I was no longer consumed by anger or sadness. Instead, I was focused on my journey, learning to prioritize my own emotional health while cautiously navigating the complexities of rebuilding trust. The process wouldn't be easy, but I was finally learning to believe in the possibility of healing, both for myself and for my relationship with Sarah, if that's where the path would lead. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice subtle changes in both myself and Sarah. I was more aware of my feelings and needs, actively working to maintain my emotional health while still leaving room for the possibility of reconciliation. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed genuinely committed to her own growth. She continued attending therapy, journaling, and participating in workshops aimed at improving her communication skills. We began to meet regularly, but our interactions were different now. They were marked by honesty, vulnerability, and respect for the boundaries I had set. It was refreshing to see her eager to listen, to ask questions, and to engage in meaningful dialogues. We would often talk about our past, analyzing the events that had led to our fallout, and this reflective process helped both of us gain insights into our individual struggles. One sunny afternoon, we sat on a park bench, surrounded by the vibrant hues of autumn leaves. Our conversation flowed easily, and I felt an ease I hadn't experienced in a long time. "I appreciate how patient you've been with me," Sarah said, her voice soft and sincere. "I know I hurt you deeply, and the last thing I want is to rush you into anything. I'm just grateful for the chance to be in your life again, even if it's slow." I looked at her, genuinely reflecting on my feelings. It's been a journey for both of us. I've realized that healing doesn't happen overnight. I'm still figuring out what I want, but I can see that you're committed to improving yourself, and that means a lot to me. She smiled, and this time it felt genuine. "I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve. I know it will take time, but I'm willing to put in the work." That evening, as we walked through the park, I noticed how the distance between us had gradually diminished. We were no longer defined solely by the betrayal. We were two individuals striving for understanding and growth. As we strolled, I felt a peace settling over me, a sense of acceptance that hadn't been there before. Still, I was cautious. I understood that while things seemed to be improving, the path to rebuilding trust was still fragile. I didn't want to let my guard down completely, and I reminded myself to take things one day at a time. As the weeks continued, Sarah and I explored the dynamics of our new relationship. We took baby steps, having dinner together, attending events with friends, and slowly reintegrating our lives. Each moment was laced with an awareness of our past, but there was also an undeniable willingness to nurture what we had left. One evening, as we sat on my couch watching a movie, I felt her head resting against my shoulder. A wave of nostalgia washed over me, and I realized that the act of being physically close again didn't feel forced. It felt natural. I turned to her, and she looked up at me with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice just above a whisper. "Of course," I replied, feeling my heart race slightly. "Do you think we can ever truly get back to where we were, or is it too late for that?" I pondered her question carefully. "I don't think we can go back to who we were, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. We've both changed. We've learned from our mistakes. I don't want to recreate the past. I want to build something new, something stronger." Her eyes brightened, and for the first time in a long while I saw a glimmer of hope in her expression. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I want to build something real with you." In that moment, I realized that I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. I didn't have all the answers, but I felt a sense of optimism that had been absent for so long. We were forging our own path, one that would be grounded in honesty and mutual respect. As the seasons changed, I found myself not just healing but thriving. I had learned to prioritize my happiness, to embrace my independence, and to navigate the complexities of love and trust. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught me valuable lessons about myself and what I genuinely wanted in a relationship. One quiet evening after a long day, I sat down to write in my journal. I reflected on everything that had transpired, the heartache, the confusion, and the eventual growth. I realized that I could now offer advice to those facing similar struggles. It's vital to prioritize your well-being above all else. Healing takes time, and it's essential to set boundaries that protect your heart. Whether Sarah and I would ultimately find our way back to a committed relationship remained uncertain, but I no longer feared the potential of that future. I had come to understand that love can be messy, complicated, and even painful, but it can also be a source of incredible strength and resilience. I closed my journal, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the power to shape my own destiny. Life would continue to unfold, and I was committed to navigating it with a newfound sense of clarity and purpose.